At 10 in the morning on April 7th, 2026, someone opened a brand new account on a prediction market platform. They had never made a single bet before. No history, no track record, a completely blank slate. Within minutes, they deposited money and placed a massive wager. Their bet? The United States and Iran would reach a ceasefire that same day. The odds of that happening, according to the market, were roughly 9 cents on the dollar. The public probability was less than 9%. That morning, Donald Trump had posted on social media that an entire civilization would die that night if Iran didn't comply with his demands. World War III chatter was everywhere. Television analysts were saying there was no deal coming. Every public signal pointed toward more war. This anonymous account bet on peace anyway. At 6:30 that evening, Trump posted the ceasefire announcement on Truth Social. The account cashed out with $200,000 in profit. That is not luck. That is not good timing. That is someone who knew. And they were not alone. If you have never heard about the war within the war, the one being fought with crypto wallets and prediction markets while bombs fall on Tehran and Beirut, you need to watch this entire video. This is the story mainstream financial news is tiptoeing around. This channel isn't going to tiptoe. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell. This is exactly the kind of breakdown we do every time the world moves and the real story gets buried. Before the names, the numbers, and the accounts, understand the machine that made this possible. Prediction markets are platforms where anyone on Earth can place a bet on the outcome of real-world events. Not just sports, not just elections, geopolitical events, military operations, the timing of wars, the death of heads of state, whether a ceasefire would be signed before a specific date, whether a country would be bombed before a specific time. All of it is tradable, all of it has odds, all of it pays out in cryptocurrency. The two biggest platforms are Polymarket and Kalshi. In February 2026 alone, the two platforms combined processed more than $18 billion in monthly trading volume. That is not a fringe internet gambling site. That is a financial institution. Kalshi is reportedly on track for an annualized revenue run rate of $1.5 billion. Both platforms are seeking valuations approaching $20 billion. These are major nodes in the modern financial system, and they are completely, structurally, almost impossibly easy to abuse if you have information that other people don't have. The Iran war turned these platforms into something that has never existed before in history. A real-time financial market where investors can bet, with leverage, with anonymity, using cryptocurrency, on whether countries will go to war, when the war will pause, and when it will resume. $170 million flowed through Polymarket ceasefire contracts alone. More than $60 million was wagered on the single April 7th contract. The total prediction market exposure to the Iran war became one of the largest geopolitical wagers in the short history of these platforms. And inside that ocean of money, accounts that knew things they shouldn't have known. Walk through the April 7th trades. Every detail matters. The morning of April 7th, Trump's rhetoric was at its most extreme. He posted online threatening annihilation. The official White House position was war, not peace. Every major media outlet was reporting escalation. Pakistan was attempting to mediate, but there were no public signals of a deal. The ceasefire odds on Polymarket were in single digits. Between that morning and 6:30 in the evening, at least 50 brand new Polymarket accounts placed substantial yes bets on the ceasefire happening that day. 50 accounts, all placing their very first bets, all betting on the same event, all betting on the outcome with the lowest public probability. One account was created at approximately 10 in the morning. It put in around $72,000 worth of bets at an average price of 8.8 cents per contract. The ceasefire was announced. That account walked away with $200,000 in profit. Another account, created the day before on April 6th, targeted the exact same contract. Profit, $125,000. A third account was created 12 minutes before Trump posted the announcement. 12 minutes. It placed just under $32,000 in bets. Estimated profit, $48,500. In each case, these were the first and often only transactions these wallets had ever made. No other bets, no other history. Accounts that existed for the sole purpose of placing one very specific, very profitable wager, and then disappearing back into anonymity. A Republican congressman who had already been working on prediction market legislation reviewed the data and said publicly, "It's highly unlikely that these are good faith trades. It's much more likely that these are insiders with access to information ahead of the public." That was not a fringe senator making a political attack. That was a member of the House who had spent months studying how these platforms operate. He looked at the blockchain data and called it what it appeared to be. But April 7th was not the beginning. It was the latest chapter in a pattern that blockchain analysts had been tracking for over a year. A cryptocurrency analytics firm called Bubble Maps had been monitoring a specific cluster of Polymarket accounts. These accounts kept changing their names, cycling through handles like Magamessy, then ElonFax89678, then Nothing Ever Happens 911, then Nothing Ever Fricking Happens, then an incomprehensible string of random characters. The names changed, the wallet addresses didn't, the money trail was permanent. This cluster of accounts had correctly predicted every major military escalation in the Iran conflict. Not just once, not just twice. Multiple independent surprise military operations, all called correctly by the same group of wallets. They successfully bet on Israel's launch of Operation Rising Lion against Iran on June 13, 2025. They successfully bet on America's bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities on June 21, 2025. They successfully bet on the launch of the full U.S.-Israel war against Iran on February 28, 2026. And on April 7th, they successfully bet on the ceasefire. The three core accounts in this cluster made more than $600,000 on the ceasefire bet alone. On the February 28th War Start bets, the same cluster made approximately $1.2 million. The total documented profits attributed to this one set of interconnected wallets exceeded $1.8 million. All of it from betting on the precise timing of classified military operations and secret diplomatic negotiations. Bubble Maps was careful in its public statements. It said it could not definitively prove the accounts belonged to insiders. It acknowledged the accounts had not won every bet. They lost money on a March 31st ceasefire prediction that never materialized. But its language was pointed. The firm stated that their track record of correctly calling surprise attacks on Iran suggests they may have access to better information than most. Better information than most. In this context, that phrase means one thing. These accounts appear to have known about classified military decisions before those decisions became public. Now understand what was happening simultaneously in the oil markets, because the prediction market story is only half of it. Prediction markets run on small bets compared to what's possible in commodity futures. While accounts were making hundreds of thousands on Polymarket, someone was making orders of magnitude more in oil. Oil prices had surged roughly 40% since the start of the Iran war. Every major development, a ceasefire announcement, a threat to bomb power plants, a hint of negotiations, moved the price of oil by $10 to $15 per barrel. Each contract in the oil futures market represents 1,000 barrels. Traders can hold enormous positions with relatively modest capital due to leverage. The scale of what was possible was staggering. A position of $580 million in futures contracts placed minutes before a Trump de-escalation announcement, then sold after oil prices dropped $10 to $15 per barrel, would generate profits in the hundreds of millions, possibly more if repeated across multiple well-timed trades. That is exactly what appears to have happened. Approximately 6,200 oil futures contracts, with a notional value of $580 million, changed hands in a single one-minute window before Trump's post hinting at productive conversations with Iran. The average trading volume during that same one-minute period on each of the previous 5 trading days had been roughly 700 contracts. Someone bought 8 times the normal amount of oil futures in 1 minute. Then Trump posted about talks. Oil prices moved. The profits on that single minute of trading could have been massive. A legal specialist in futures trading described the volume spike as more than enough to warrant investigation. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the federal agency that regulates these markets, was described as undergoing a transformation in response to the pattern. The agency's chairman said publicly that the CFTC was reassessing everything. But here is the complication. The CFTC is led by an appointee of the Trump administration, and the Trump family has direct financial ties to the prediction market industry. Donald Trump Jr. has invested in Polymarket through his venture capital firm. He serves as a strategic advisor for Kalshi. The federal agency tasked with regulating prediction markets is led by a Trump appointee who has publicly stated he would defend Kalshi against any legal challenges at the state level. One senator said publicly, "There are clearly individuals in the White House who are making money off of when the United States goes to war or not." California's governor signed an executive order banning political appointees in his state from trading on prediction markets, saying Trump's Washington was riddled with ethical failures and insider profiteering. The pattern extended beyond the Iran war. In January 2026, newly created Polymarket accounts placed bets that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro would be removed from power before the end of the month. One account alone made more than $430,000 on that bet. Shortly after, Trump announced Maduro had been captured by U.S. forces. Then came an arrest that removed all ambiguity about how far this goes. 2 Israelis were arrested and charged with using Israeli military secrets to trade on Polymarket. They had obtained classified information about Israeli military operations. They converted that classified intelligence into cryptocurrency profits. They were caught. They were charged. That case proved something that had previously been theoretical. People with access to classified military information were using prediction markets to profit from that information. It wasn't speculation. It wasn't a coincidence streak. It was a crime. And it had already happened. Then Kalshi suspended a video editor for the YouTube personality Mr. Beast, who had used inside information obtained through his work to profit on prediction market contracts. The editor was fired. These were not anomalies. They were the visible edge of a pattern that blockchain analysts, lawmakers, and federal regulators were all beginning to describe in the same terms. A systematic exploitation of prediction markets by people with access to non-public information. An academic study from Columbia Law School and the University of Haifa had been working on this for months before the ceasefire story broke. They examined Polymarket's entire blockchain ledger, every transaction, publicly visible because the platform runs on cryptocurrency, looking for patterns consistent with trading on non-public information. Their conclusion? Transactions that showed patterns consistent with insider trading had generated profits of approximately $143 million over 2 years. $143 million. Extracted from ordinary traders who were betting without classified information by parties who appear to have had access to that classified information. The researchers were careful to say that well-timed trades aren't proof of privileged access. The data shows correlation. It shows pattern. It shows that certain accounts are consistently right about events that cannot be predicted through public analysis alone. But proving the source of the information requires access to internal data that only the platforms possess. And so far, the platforms have not cooperated. Polymarket did not respond to requests for comment about the April 7th accounts. The company uses proxy smart contract wallets that make it structurally difficult to identify the real person behind any given account. Only Polymarket's internal data can reveal whether 50 new accounts placing identical bets hours before a ceasefire announcement are 50 different people or one person with 50 different wallets. Congress moved. Slowly, but it moved. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy said he would introduce legislation to ban betting on military actions entirely. He called prediction markets related to war fundamentally corrupt and said they create perverse incentives for government officials to shape life and death decisions around their own financial interests. Republican Representative Blake Moore, who had already been working on prediction market regulation, introduced a bill to bar federal officials and congressional staff from trading on prediction markets tied to government policy or military outcomes. Democratic Representative Richie Torres introduced parallel legislation in the House. For the first time in years, members of Congress from both parties were looking at the same data and reaching the same conclusion. The current system allows, and possibly incentivizes, people inside the United States government to trade on classified information that they themselves help create. They can know about a ceasefire before it's announced and bet accordingly. They can know about a military strike before it's executed and profit from it. There is no law that currently makes that explicitly illegal in the context of prediction markets. The platforms themselves made moves. Polymarket rewrote its rules to explicitly bar users from trading on contracts where they possess confidential information or could influence the outcome of an event. Kalshi implemented preemptive screening to proactively ban politicians from trading on markets related to their own decisions. Both platforms partnered with third-party firms to monitor suspicious activity. But pseudonymous cryptocurrency trading makes enforcement structurally difficult. You can ban a name. You cannot ban an anonymous wallet. You can flag suspicious patterns. You cannot prove who is behind them without internal data that the platforms have not released. Understand the full picture of what has been documented. 50 anonymous accounts placed their first ever bets on a ceasefire hours before it was announced. 3 of those accounts, linked to a cluster that had previously called every major escalation in the Iran war, made over $600,000. One account alone turned $72,000 into $200,000 in a single trading session. Another made $467,000 on the same contract, according to separate blockchain analysis. These same wallets had made over $1 million correctly predicting when the war would start. They had made money on the timing of Israeli airstrikes. They had made money on the timing of American airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Event after event after event. Surprise military decisions that cannot be predicted through public analysis alone, called correctly by the same set of accounts. Then, in the oil market, $580 million of futures contracts changed hands in 60 seconds before a presidential post that moved oil prices by double digits. Oil traders wagered nearly $1 billion on prices dropping just hours before the ceasefire announcement. The academic study says patterns consistent with insider trading generated over $140 million in profits across 2 years on Polymarket alone. 2 Israelis were arrested for using military secrets to trade. A congressional aide was caught. An influencer's employee was caught and fired. And the federal regulator who oversees prediction markets is an appointee of the same administration whose war decisions are generating the profits. Someone knew the ceasefire was coming on April 7th. Multiple people knew. They bet on it before Trump posted. They walked away with hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they are almost certainly still out there. Same wallets, different names, waiting for the next announcement. The war in Iran is being fought on 2 fronts. One front has missiles and airstrikes and body counts. The other front has anonymous crypto wallets and prediction markets, and people in positions of power converting classified information into money. One of those fronts is on the news every night. The other one just made someone $400,000 before breakfast. Now you know about both of them.